She didn't slam the door. That's what still gets me. If she had screamed, or thrown something, or told me exactly what I did wrong, I think I could have made peace with it by now. Instead, she just packed 2 bags on a Tuesday morning and said, "Take care of yourself," like I was a coworker she'd never see again. I'm going to tell you what I figured out afterward, not right away, but months later, in pieces, about why people really leave. Not the reason they give you. The real one. Her name was Mara, and we'd been together for 6 years. On paper, nothing was wrong. We didn't fight much. We split the bills fairly. We still laughed at the same dumb shows. I used to tell people we had a good thing going, and I meant it every time I said it. I worked long hours at a logistics company, the kind of job that eats your evenings without you noticing, and Mara worked from home doing freelance design. I always figured that meant she had the easier life, quiet apartment, flexible hours, no commute. I never really asked her what her days were like. I assumed I already knew. Looking back, that word, assumed, is probably the whole story right there. About 4 months before she left, I started noticing small things. Nothing dramatic. She'd stopped asking how my day was, not in an angry way, more like she'd quietly stopped expecting an answer that mattered. She used to leave little notes on the counter, dumb stuff like, "Bought the coffee you like," those stopped too. I told myself she was just busy. Deadlines. Everyone gets distant sometimes. I remember thinking, we're fine, we're just in a slow season, the way you tell yourself a plant is fine right up until it's clearly dead. There was this one night that stuck with me, even though nothing happened. I came home late, dropped my bag by the door, and found her sitting on the couch with the TV off, just sitting there in the dark with her phone face down beside her. I asked if she was okay. She looked at me for a second, not upset, not cold, just sort of studying me, and said, "Yeah. Just tired." Then she smiled, and the smile didn't match her eyes at all. I noticed it. I filed it away. And then I did what I always did back then, which was nothing. The day she left, I asked her why. I actually said the words, "Just tell me what I did." And she shook her head and said, "You didn't do anything, Dan." That's kind of the problem. At the time I heard that as an insult, like she was being cryptic on purpose to punish me. I spent weeks angry about that sentence. You didn't do anything, that's kind of the problem. What was I supposed to do with that? It sounded like a riddle designed to make me feel crazy. It wasn't until a conversation with my sister, almost half a year later, that something cracked open. I was venting to her over the phone, going through the whole thing again, how there was no big fight, no cheating, no smoking gun, nothing I could point to and say, "That's why." My sister works as a counselor, and she'd heard me tell this story maybe 4 times by then. This time she didn't just listen. She stopped me. "Dan, can I ask you something? In the last year you two were together, how many times did you ask her something and actually wait for the full answer? Not half listen. Actually wait." I started to answer automatically, of course I did, and then I just stopped, because I was trying to remember one specific time, and I couldn't. Not one. I could remember asking, "How was your day?" Sure. But I couldn't remember a single time I'd followed up on her answer, asked a second question, sat with what she said long enough for it to matter. I used to think being easygoing and not overthinking things was a strength of mine. Sitting on that phone call, I started to wonder if it had actually just been absence wearing a calm face. My sister said something else that I've turned over in my head 100 times since. She said most people don't leave because of one big betrayal. They leave because of 1,000 small moments where they quietly learn that they're not really being seen, and at some point, the loneliness of being with someone becomes heavier than the loneliness of being alone. She said it like it was obvious, something she'd explained to a dozen people before. To me it landed like a diagnosis I didn't know I'd been avoiding. I started replaying our last year differently after that. Not looking for the big blow-up anymore, because there wasn't one. I started looking for the small withdrawals, the times she'd start telling me about a client who'd been rude to her, and I'd nod along while checking my phone. The times she'd ask my opinion on a design and I'd say, "Looks great," without actually looking. None of it felt like neglect in the moment. It felt like normal life, the ordinary static of two people who'd been together a long time. I think that's exactly what made it so easy to miss. Nobody warns you that a relationship can end from something as quiet as inattention. We're taught to watch for the dramatic stuff, lies, arguments, other people. Nobody tells you to watch for the sound of someone slowly stopping. A few weeks after that call with my sister, I reached out to Mara. Not to get her back, I want to be clear about that, because for a while I think that was part of my motive and I had to be honest with myself about it. I reached out because I wanted to actually understand, without defending myself, without needing her to say it was okay. We met for coffee, which felt strange and formal after 6 years of just existing in the same space. I asked her straight out, was it the thing my sister said? Feeling unseen? She was quiet for a second, turning her cup slowly on the table. Then she said something I didn't expect. She said it wasn't that I never saw her, it was that I only saw the version of her that made things easy for me. The one who didn't need much, who handled her own stuff, who didn't ask for attention because she'd learned not to expect it. She said somewhere along the way she started performing fine so consistently that I stopped checking whether it was true. And the exhausting part wasn't the loneliness itself. It was doing it for years while being told, constantly, that we had a good thing going. That sentence hit harder than the door not slamming ever did. Here's the part that changed how I see people now, not just relationships. I used to think leaving a relationship, a job, a friendship, was mostly about a final straw. A specific injury. Something you could point to and explain in one sentence. But I don't think that's usually true. I think most people leave the way water leaves a cracked container, slowly, quietly, through 100 tiny openings, until one day there's just nothing left to hold. And the person who caused it often has no idea, because none of the individual moments looked like harm. They looked like ordinary distraction. Ordinary busyness. Ordinary life. What I've started doing since then, in every relationship I have, not just romantic ones, is asking myself a question I never used to ask: is the person in front of me actually being heard right now, or are they just being tolerated politely while I wait for my turn to talk? It's an uncomfortable question, because most of the time, if I'm honest, the answer isn't flattering. But asking it has changed how I show up. With my friends. With my mom. Eventually, with someone new. I don't know if Mara and I could have lasted if I'd understood any of this 2 years earlier. Maybe. Maybe not. Some things run their course regardless. But I know now that the reasons people give when they leave, it's not you, it's me, I just need space, you didn't do anything, those aren't evasions most of the time. They're often the most honest thing a person can say, because the real cause isn't one act you can name. It's an absence. And absence is a strange thing to explain to someone who was standing right there the whole time. So here's what I keep coming back to, and maybe you felt some version of it too. We tend to believe that love, or loyalty, or connection, survives on the big gestures, the anniversaries, the apologies after fights, the grand effort when something goes visibly wrong. But I think it actually survives, or doesn't, in the small unremarkable minutes. The ones nobody's keeping score of. The question is whether anyone's really paying attention to them until it's too late to matter. I wonder how many people are sitting across from someone right now, quietly deciding whether they're still worth staying for, and how many of us would even notice.